The next thing when I came to, I saw the doctor and he had the x-rays and the CAT scan. And as soon as I saw the vertebrae, I knew I was in trouble. I had multiple compression fractures with fragments on the cord. And then because the way I landed, the very top vertebrae kind of fractured like this, and the arch that the spinal cord passed through kind of broke like a pretzel. The typical surgical procedure for something like this is called Harrington rod surgery. And they cut out the back parts of your vertebrae, and then they screw in these long stainless steel rods. In my case, it would be about 12 inches from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. I knew that if I had that surgery, that I would be limited for the rest of my life. And when the second doctor came in, and I said, do they ever not do the surgery? And he said, in your case, you don't get the surgery, you're gonna be paralyzed for the rest of your life, So, yeah, that was a kind of a tough moment for a 23, 24-year-old kid, that's got his whole life in front of him. I looked at the guy, and all of a sudden I realized that, I had the answer. I knew in that moment, I'm like, there's no way I'm doing this. And I just thought, the only thing that I could hold on to is the power that made the body heals the body. That's all I kept saying. And I just made a deal with myself. If I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and, mind over matter. My name is Joe Dispenza, and I grew up in a small town called Clark, New Jersey. I grew up in a very loving family, which was, I thought, normal at the time. And my father spent the first 12 years of his life in Sicily as a child, and then came to the United States at 12. My mother is from an Italian family that she's first generation. And I have one brother. He's an older brother. We're about a year apart, so we grew up being best friends, did everything together. But I think what was cool about my parents was that family was their priority. The family and educating their kids was really important. I grew up in an environment where whatever my interest was, even if they didn't understand it or didn't know enough about it, they always supported what my interests were. I played a lot of sports. I played baseball, played a lot of football, played a little basketball. But somewhere around my senior year in high school, I took a yoga class, just very different than anything that I'd ever done before. And breaking from the traditional sports that most Americans do, this was very different for me. And what caught my attention mostly was that I couldn't do it, that I had to really work on consciously on doing these things called asanas, these positions. And so that just kind of opened my mind at that time that there was more to life than what I knew. My senior year in high school, I started reading a lot of existentialists, Dostoevsky and Kafka and Unamuno, and just kind of opened my mind that there was more to life than my own experience. And then I got fascinated with just this purpose in existence. What is our purpose in existence? I think for an 18-year-old kid at that time, when you're asking those questions while all your friends are partying and having a great time, it was a nuisance. But it stopped me, to ask bigger questions. I thought I wanted to be a pharmacist. That's how I started out. And then I thought I wanted to be a mortician, because I thought maybe I wanted to work with bodies, right? And then my dad said, okay, and he took me to a mortuary, and that was the end of that for me. And then I said, okay, I want to be a doctor. And something inside of me was interested in something that was way more vitalistic and not so mechanistic. And so I just started looking at alternative therapies, alternative medicine, nutrition, chiropractic, and that to me was something that was more exciting. By the time I was 18 or so, I was pretty clear in the direction that I wanted to go. So when I went to college, I studied pre-med. I studied all the sciences. And I was taking 21 credits a semester because I wanted to get to chiropractic college as soon as I could. And I remember running through a hallway of a building. I was going from one class to the next, and I saw, like, on the cork boards that they had on the, outside the lecture halls, there was a paper that said, "Learn while you sleep." And I just ripped off the phone number and kept running, and turns out it was all about self-hypnosis. And this is, I think, where my curiosity had gone at the time. I was interested in learning how to remember everything that I could while I was in a lecture so that I didn't have to study as much or take as many notes, if I could learn the material while I was there. And so, coincidentally, I had roommates in college that were deep state hypnotic subjects. I mean, they were somnambulists. They would talk to each other in their sleep all the time, and then get up and go to the bathroom, come back and keep talking and never remember any of it. And I was fascinated by this. I started reading all these books on the side on hypnosis, and I started hypnotizing my roommates. And I was really, really surprised at the power of the subconscious mind. I mean, it really opened my mind up. And so I think that was kind of my first curiosity about human potential, like in a hypnotic state, how people were able to do certain things that they couldn't do when they were conscious. So when I finally went to chiropractic college, my parents, one of their friends, as I was leaving, handed me a book, and it was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And like, I never had any idea that one of my father's friends was into any of this stuff. And he handed me the book, and I was driving from New Jersey all the way to Atlanta. And I was driving with my roommate. And I read the whole entire book on the drive. It's a pretty thick book. And it blew my mind. It blew my mind because it was something that I intuitively felt, deep inside of me, that was transcendent of the religion that I was brought up in, that pointed the finger at human possibility and potential. And somehow I had these two things I was thinking about: the power of the subconscious mind through hypnosis, and then just what these yogis and mystics were able to do. That reignited my whole passion for yoga again. I started doing yoga every single day. My typical day was getting up at 3:45. And then for 3 hours a day, I would practice yoga. Then I would shower, eat real fast, and start classes at 8 o'clock. And I did that for almost my whole entire time I was in Atlanta. And I think I learned more about the human body during that time than probably any textbook or any class, because it was very experiential. And along the way, while this was all going on, I still had that fascination with hypnosis. And so I decided to, while I was in chiropractic college, to take my student loan money and start going to this institution in Norcross, Georgia, called Hypnosis Motivation Institute. And on the weekends, I would go through these courses. And ultimately, I went through over 500 hours of training and got certified as a clinical hypnotherapist. I opened a practice in a holistic healing center and started working with people with all kinds of health conditions, fears and phobias, sexual dysfunction, sports, memory, gifted and talented, bulimic, anorexics, smoking, alcoholism. And during that time, I just witnessed the most incredible changes in people's minds and bodies, but I couldn't reconcile what the Eastern traditional yogis were doing with what hypnosis really brought in kind of the Western conventional way. And I was in my 20s, and this is a time where everybody's out partying and everybody's out, going to bars and stuff, and it just wasn't anything that I was ever interested in. I was more interested in kind of this idea of transcendence, this idea of overcoming myself. When I finally graduated and I decided to move to San Diego, I continued doing hypnosis, and then I opened the yoga studio in San Diego. This was in the 80s, the early 80s. But I had a great life. I started doing triathlons. I had never really done one before, so as an immersive personality, I started training. I started, riding my bike, running, taking swimming lessons to get better at swimming, and started doing triathlons. And then my life changed dramatically from that point. So I went to the triathlon in Palm Springs, and they expected about 500 people for the race in Palm Springs, and there was over 1,000. So they had to divide the triathlon into 2 groups. And I had just walked up to the registration desk, and I said, "Which group am I in?" And the woman said, "Oh, yeah, I think you're in the first group." And then I stepped back, and they write your number on your leg, and they write your number on your arm. So I was kind of leaning back like this, and the woman was writing this number on my leg, 282, I think it was. And I said, "Oh, I'm in the first group." I go, "When do I start?" And she said, "Oh, in about 15 minutes. And all of a sudden I heard the gun. Total chaos. I'm still at the registration desk. The staging area is around the lake. So I grab my bike and I run it over to the staging area for the bikes, and then I turn around and I run. She goes, "I guess you're going now." And I just go running around the lake. So by the time I got in the water, everything just felt off. I'm getting kicked. I'm swimming next to people swimming. I finally made it through the swimming portion of the race. I jumped on my bike, and that was probably my strongest of the 3 legs was cycling. So I thought I could catch up and make some time. So I was a few miles into the race, and there was a police officer like this on the corner, and he was pointing to me like this, and I was coming to this corner and I was gonna make a turn. The problem was he had his back to the oncoming traffic, so there were 2 cyclists on the corner, and I kind of swung around the 2 cyclists, and when I came around the corner like that and he was waving me on, this 4-wheel drive Bronco, going about 55 miles an hour, just hit me from behind and catapulted me out of my bike, and I kind of landed on my butt, and it was an 83-year-old woman that was driving the car, and I don't know if she knew that she hit me right away. So when I landed, the bumper was still coming, the truck was still coming, so I grabbed onto the bumper, and then I got dragged a little bit, and then she stopped, and then I just rolled, down the road. When you land that hard in this kind of way on your butt, you have a compressive force in your spine. And so I had fractured 6 vertebrae in my spine, T8, T9, T10, T11, T12, and L1. Didn't know it at the time, but I knew it wasn't a sprain strain because as I was laying there, I could feel all the blood kind of pooling in my lungs there. They took me to JFK Hospital there. My body was convulsing from the trauma. I think it took about 4 or 5 hours to go through the CAT scan because I was moving and you can't move. So they finally sedated me, and the next thing when I came to, I saw the doctor, and he had the X-rays and the CAT scan, and as soon as I saw the vertebrae, I knew I was in trouble. I had multiple compression fractures. I had with fragments on the cord, and then because the way I landed, the very top vertebrae, the 8th thoracic vertebrae, kind of fractured like this, and the arch that the spinal cord passed through kind of broke like a pretzel. So that was a little bit of cord compression right at the level of my 8th thoracic vertebrae, and I had a lot of trouble with my lower extremities, my lower body, in terms of numbness and lack of movement. The typical surgical procedure for something like this is called Harrington rod surgery. And they cut out the back parts of your vertebrae, and then they screw in these long stainless steel rods. In my case, it would be about 12 inches from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. I knew that if I had that surgery that I would be limited for the rest of my life. Like I couldn't bend my spine. And if I was in pain, there would be very little options for me in terms of changing the pain without using narcotics or heavy sedatives. So I wasn't so quick to get the surgery. The challenge with that is that the body starts immediately laying down strings of calcium to try to heal the bone, so I only had a certain amount of time to make the decision. So I asked for a second opinion. And when the second doctor came in, he said, Harrington rod, surgery is the way to go. And I said, do they ever not do the surgery? And he said, in your case, you don't get the surgery, you're going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life, So, yeah, that was a kind of a tough moment for a 23, 24-year-old kid, that's got his whole life in front of him. When I got to Scripps Hospital, you have to picture the head of the orthopedic department. He was the typical, doctor, red tie, sport coat with the lab coat over the stethoscope around there, salt and pepper hair, really fit. You could tell he was the person. And he just looked at my father. My father flew into town, and he looked at my father and he said, he's got multiple compression fractures of his spine. He's got fragments on the cord, and he's got the neural arch broken. He needs Harrington rod surgery right away. If it was my kid, listen, I would do it right now. And my father, instead of saying okay, he just kind of looked at me, and I said, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I'm ready. And the surgeon got so mad. I mean, in the 80s, you really didn't say no to a doctor, especially in a condition like this. And I totally understood where he was coming from. He was trying to help me. But I think one of the worst of human conditions is indecision. Like when you're uncertain, so here I am weighing everything I know from a clinical perspective. I know the body can do a little bit of healing, but it's not going to restore bone growth like the way I need it. And then I got to think about living in a wheelchair or having Harrington rods in my back for the rest of my life and all the things I can't do, right? I said, I want to get one more opinion. So I got one more opinion, and I said, does it have to be 12-inch stainless steel rods? Can we put in smaller rods, And he said, look, we can put in 8-inch stainless steel rods. We can leave them in for a couple years, take them out, put then maybe smaller ones, if it's stabilized. And I said to the doctor, God, don't you think that would limit motion in my thoracic spine? And he looked at me and he said, you don't have any motion in your thoracic spine. And I just remember looking at him. He was like this kind of big guy and heavy-set guy. And I just remember looking at him thinking, my God, maybe you don't have any motion in your thoracic spine. But I know that I do, right? I looked at the guy, and all of a sudden I realized that, I had the answer. I knew in that moment, I'm like, there's no way I'm doing this. No, I'm going to go home. The leading surgeon came rushing into the room when he heard that I wanted to leave, and he thought I hit my head. He thought I had a head injury. He was yelling at my father, and my father was so cool. He was like, hey, it's his life. I want him to make the decision, So I checked out of the hospital. I just thought the only thing that I could hold on to is the power that made the body heals the body. That's all I kept saying. And I thought, there's an intelligence within me that's giving me life. I've seen the power of the subconscious mind over and over again in my clinical practice with all kinds of people healing and changing and having all kinds of amazing health conditions go into remission. So I know there's a power there, and I'm thinking about all the things that Yogananda and the mystics were talking about and the saints were talking about. And this was all theoretical to me. It was really theoretical, and I thought, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm not riding my bike. I'm not running. I'm not teaching yoga. I'm not seeing patients. I'm basically laying face down. And that's what I was doing. I was laying face down to support the way that my spine was broken, that they recommended that I stay face down with a pillow under my chest and to not move. So I thought if I could connect with this intelligence, the only way that I could connect with it is I have to be present with it. And I want to give it a plan. I want to show it a design. I want to give it a template. I want to give it some orders. I want to show it exactly what I want, right? And if I could get that information in there, it could possibly take the healing of this body to the next level. Not just heal the bones that were broken, but heal the bones and restore those bones, So this was a young kid that was just weighing what he knew against what he didn't know. And I was willing to take the risk. And I think that's a dark night. That's a dark night of the soul when you realize that nobody has the answers but you. I made myself a deal. One was, I'm going to connect with this intelligence, give it a plan, give it a design, and I'm not going to let any thought slip by my awareness that I don't want to experience. And it's kind of funny because when you're in a crisis like that, you tend to focus on what you don't want to happen instead of what you do want to have happen. And that's just when we're out of balance and we're in survival, that's what the mind does, right? So I would close my eyes and I decided that I was going to reconstruct every vertebrae. I knew what they look like. I knew I've held them in my hand. I know a lot about spinal biomechanics. So I would, like a mason, I would just start building the bones back up, and reconstruct them. Then I could see one, and then I'd go to the next one, and then my mind would be thinking about, should I sell my practice? Should I sell my home? What if I can't walk again? And I'd start all over, and then I'd get frustrated, then I'd get impatient, and then I'd get angry, and I'd feel victimized, and I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted to do. And I think that went on for like 6 weeks. I spent hours trying to just get my mind to focus. But I had a lot of time on my hands. There was nothing else for me to do. I think I read every book that talked about the power of human potential and power of the mind, because it was the only thing that I wanted to think about, really. I didn't want to have any doubt. And for 6.5 weeks, my mind was pretty much all over the place. But right at that point, I remember just running through the whole thing from start to finish without breaking my attention at all. And it felt like I hit a tennis ball right in the sweet spot. I just hit a golf ball just right. Something just clicked. And from that point on, it got very easy. Like I was able to do what took me 3 hours to do or more in 45 minutes. I didn't know it at the time, but I was practicing the skill of paying attention, being present, right? Because I kept catching myself going unconscious. I'd come back and start from the beginning because I wanted to give it a very complete and thorough image of what I wanted. And if I lost my attention, then I went to something else and I said, oh my God, I'm showing it what I don't want. So when I went through it the whole entire time, I was firing and wiring all these circuits in my brain by practicing it. And then I just had more time on my hands. And right around that time, I started noticing like my body started changing, like all the pain was going away. I started noticing I could feel my toes, and I started noticing I was move my body, and I started noticing whatever I was doing inside of me was producing some change in my body outside of me. And then I started really believing like this is working, right? So now instead of dreading it every day, I was looking forward to it. And then I started thinking about all the things I wanted to do. Like I started thinking about seeing a sunset. Like I just wanted to go out on the beach and see a sunset, or using the shower. Like I would imagine being in the shower and let myself fully experience it. Sitting at a table with my friends eating lunch, again, sitting in a restaurant eating lunch. So I started to imagine all these futures and emotionally embrace them. I didn't know it at the time, but I was marrying a clear intention with an elevated emotion, and my body started responding to my mind more and more. And then at 10.5 weeks, I just woke up one morning and I just knew that was the day I was going to walk. I just got up and I just walked right back into my life, and I just made a deal with myself. If I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection. I was a changed person. There's an old part of me that died, that I left behind. I couldn't go back to my life as the same person. I was not the same person. I had so much joy for life that I was able to walk. I was back training and back doing my thing at 12 weeks. I know I tried on the body cast once, and I was like, this there's no way. Like, there's no way. And so I couldn't go back to the life that I left because I was not the same person any longer. What was I going to complain about? I mean, I had another chance, like I had another opportunity at life. And so, I walked back into my life and I started asking big questions. Like, who am I? Like, really? Why am I here? What is my purpose in life? I sold everything, moved to the Pacific Northwest, raised my kids out in the country. Just really took some time. And I just wanted to find the answers, and I couldn't find the answers in any of the traditional textbooks that I had studied. I would go to the University of Washington Medical Library and just try to figure out how could this have happened? Like, how did this happen? Like, if it did happen, how did it happen? And so this kind of allowed my intellectual mind that was always interested in finding answers, the scientific part of myself, to kind of merge with kind of the spiritual aspect of really what I was trying to understand. And that kind of led me right to quantum physics, because the quantum model of reality transcends all the laws of Newtonian physics that make up this three-dimensional world. And at that fundamental level, mind and matter and the quantum are one. They're not separate in any way. And then I started researching neuroplasticity, and I started studying epigenetics, and the epigenetic model could certainly explain how I could make proteins again to change my body structure. So here I am trying to piece together all these branches of science to help integrate my understanding of what happened to me. So after a period of time, I started wondering if it happened to me, if it could happen to other people. And so I started interviewing people that were diagnosed with a chronic health condition or a terminal health condition, and they were treating conventionally or unconventionally, and they were staying the same or getting worse. Then all of a sudden they got better. And that's called the spontaneous remission. At least it was at the time when I was studying it. And I wanted to see, if I interviewed enough people, if there was some cause that was producing that effect. Like, was there anything that they had in common? So I traveled to about 17 different countries and interviewed a lot of people, hundreds of people that had a remission from their health condition. Now, at the time, I wouldn't call myself a Puritan, but I would call myself something close. I thought diet and exercise and abstaining from certain things and taking certain things could, help your health. And none of those things were common in people that had a spontaneous remission. In fact, they were from all different cultures, all different beliefs, all different walks of life. But they had some things in common that I felt that were really important. The first thing is that they all believed that there was some intelligence that was within them that was giving them life, that kept their heart beating, digesting their food, that was, causing thousands of genes to regulate, cells to change. Something was giving them life. The second thing was that they realized on some level that they were responsible in changing that health condition, because on some level they realized that they may have mismanaged their own thoughts and emotions, and that could be the reason why that they may have developed that health condition. But the third thing that they had in common that was so powerful is that they decided that they wanted to reinvent themselves, that they wanted to become somebody else. And many of them thought, well, if I had another life, another chance at life, how would I live it? And others thought, if I only have 6 months to live, how would I live my life? And it was crazy, because many of the people, the way they reinvented themselves is they stopped doing certain things and started doing other things. They stopped believing and thinking certain ways, and they just started thinking, believing in other ways. Or they realized they no longer wanted to be an attorney, they wanted to be a sculptor. And the last thing that I found so fascinating, which I didn't expect at all, is that they all took time to go inward. And they took time to think about who they no longer wanted to be and think about who they did want to be, and they forgave and they overcame. But in those moments where they were in their inward process, they had long moments where they lost track of space and time. That whatever they were doing inside there, in their own mind, when they came back, they expected it to be 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, and it was an hour later, or 55 minutes later. And that caused me then to start really thinking about how the brain operates. And the brain is, the front of the brain, the forebrain is like the brain's volume control. It's the seat of our attention, right? So when we're truly focused and we're present with something, the brain doesn't want to be distracted by any other thing except what it's thinking about. So like a great volume control, it lowers the volume to the circuits in the brain that process space and time. And what happens is your inner world becomes more real than your outer world. The idea of doing it and making it practical for people was exciting to me. And that's when I started teaching, courses in teaching people simple things about epigenetics and neuroplasticity and brain waves and change and a model for change and the placebo, and kind of piecing all these things together to get people to kind of think about it. And so that's when we started getting stories where people started sending in emails and saying, "You're not going to believe this." And we started seeing people's chronic health conditions changing, and they were doing the inner work not to heal. They were doing the inner work to change, and when they changed, they would heal. And so much so, it got so fascinating that we started partnering with different scientists from different universities to measure everything we could possibly measure to see what exactly was happening that could explain some of the changes that we saw in people's lives and in their health. Around this time, when I laid down from a meditation, I started having powerful electrical signals in my body. I would feel like somebody plugged me into a light socket, like a very powerful electrical charge in my body. The next thing you know, I was in space. The next thing you know, I was space. The next thing you know, I was all of space. And I had an awareness of everything that was in everything. It was like nothing that I ever felt before in my life. And when I had a very profound mystical experience, I was interested in understanding how it could happen chemically in the brain. And so I started looking at different researchers that study this tiny gland in the back of your brain called the pineal gland. And pineal means pine cone shaped. So I had read somewhere that little gland could make derivatives that could fit in the same receptor sites as serotonin and melatonin, because that's what serotonin is a daytime neurotransmitter that gets us up, and melatonin, as most people know, is a nighttime neurotransmitter that puts us to sleep and slows our brain waves down. But there were derivatives like dimethyltryptamine, DMT, that cause very profound hallucinogenic and mystical experiences. And the pineal gland, I had read somehow was that kind of alchemist that made those derivatives. And so this whole inquiry started for me, just in understanding the mystical. And there are latent systems in the brain that once activated can connect the physics of the field, the quantum field, to the biology of our brain and our mind. And the pineal gland is a tiny little radio receiver that can be tuned in to frequencies that are not the frequency of light. And when there is a greater frequency because of a greater consciousness, and the brain is functioning in a state of coherence, the pineal gland can actually connect to that information and transduce the information into another form of information, which would be chemistry. And so that's the way melatonin makes its derivatives to fit in the same receptor sites, so that the veil of this illusion is removed. And there's more information in the immaterial than there is in the material. And the probability that we're perceiving the truth of reality is zero. If your consciousness or your awareness or your attention is on everything physical and material, right? Everything you see, everything you hear, smell, taste, feel, touch. If your attention is on the three-dimensional world, where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So you have the majority of your attention and majority of your energy immersed in three-dimensional reality. You got to play by the rules. And this is the plane of demonstration. This is the plane where you have to do everything to create an experience, whatever that is. So the lack or the separation of not having something causes us to dream to have it, right? And then when we dream to have it, we realize we've got to actually get our body up and move our body through space. We have to travel through space. And when we travel through space, we experience time. So everything that we create in three-dimensional reality takes time and it takes energy. And then when we have the experience produces the emotion. The emotion takes away the lack or separation of not having it until you dream again, right? And so these are the rules that in this kind of simulation that we play by. In a near-death experience, there is a complete separation from the physical body where your awareness no longer is attached to the body in terms of processing information. Now your consciousness, and consciousness is non-local according to quantum physics, which means wherever you think you are, right? So now, if you're no longer your body and you no longer have your attention on this three-dimensional world and you're putting your attention somewhere else, if you're no longer your body, who are you? You're consciousness. You're an awareness. In the realm of infinite possibilities and infinite information, whatever level of consciousness that you were functioning as a human being, could be all kinds, you could be a consciousness where you're angry with people, you could be in a consciousness where you're judgmental, you could be in a consciousness where you're really actually a happy person or abundant person. They're all different levels of consciousness. So what happens in terms of my understanding is that you see yourself from a greater level of consciousness, not yourself as you've seen yourself or experienced yourself, but from a place of love or a place of greater understanding, a greater level of consciousness. And I think that greater level of consciousness allows us to understand ourselves and understand the people around us, because in many near-death experiences, when the person reviews their life, they don't only feel what they're feeling, but they feel what everybody else is feeling. Their awareness is beyond self. So their interaction then, when they come back from that experience from a greater level of consciousness, is integrated on some level back into their biology. I mean, many people that have near-death experiences, they don't really go into a very high level of beta ever again. In fact, their resonating brain state is more alpha. Somehow their perception of reality and their perception of death is very different than other people's. They don't have a fear of it any longer. They tend to be more present. They tend to have more meaning behind things. They tend to find joy in simpler things. Their interaction with whatever that was is brought back into their biology, and some people actually heal as a result of it because that's information, right? So information informs matter, right? So we see this in our work a lot of times when people have a mystical experience. The mystical experience creates a tremendous arousal in their body. We see it in the brainwave states. They go into these very, very high gamma states, very high. But when they come back from that arousal, and from that kind of dipping into love, dipping into source, dipping into closer to God, whatever you want to call that, when they come back, there's a biological upgrade. There's the eczema that they had their whole entire life, now it's gone. There's the Parkinson's, now it's gone. There's a stage 4 terminal disease, now it's gone. They've moved closer to oneness. They've moved closer to wholeness. They move closer to source. They move closer to pure love. And it's really reflected then in their biology. And a lot of times when they come back, they have a very different perception. In fact, they're in a new body, right? They're upgraded. They're in a new body. They're in a whole new experience of life. They're in a whole new environment. They come back, if they no longer have Parkinson's, they're in a whole new life. They're living in their environment very differently. And they're not on that same timeline. They're not on that same trajectory. They're in a whole new time. They're in a whole new future. I think the big thing, though, that we see more than anything else is whether their experience is subjective or not, whether you believe them or not, What matters most is what happens to them after that experience, right? There's a change that's taken place, right? They're not the same person any longer because they interacted or they had an experience that was transcendent of their senses. And I think that's the mystery, right? And every new experience that we have causes us to think about possibilities we would have never thought before. So there's not infinity, there's infinities. That's the never-ending process of self-discovery. I also love the idea when people have an experience that's a near-death experience, the similarity of the amount of love that they feel. And when I have had my own personal transcendental moments, the love that I felt in those moments was nothing like human love. It wasn't even like a love for a puppy or a kitten or your children. This is a very different kind of love. It's a constant. I think that a part of us awakens, like that we remember, oh my God, I came from pure love. That's who I am. That's where I came from, right? It's within me and all around me, right? Then the more love you feel, the more you remember where you came from, right? And so it has to be an awakening. It has to be an awakening. That love has to be a deeper love. And that's a great sign because our biology is programmed into the unknown being a scary place, like it being a dangerous place, the better chances in survival to run from the unknown. And yet the unknown is where we're going. And so the unknown experience has nothing to do with all those survival emotions. We've already experienced those. The unknown is going to produce emotions that we have never felt before. And if there's an infinite number of possible experiences in the field, infinite potentials, that's what it says, then there's infinite experiences. And if those infinite experiences produce infinite emotions and you're getting closer to source, then the soul's journey is to get closer and closer to pure love or, to oneness. And I think that people who come back from a near-death experience, the stigma around God as being a being, a one being, or a person, it changes for a lot of people, and they realize that the universe is way bigger than we imagined. And for me personally, the universe is conscious. The universe is aware, it's conscious, it's life, right? So our job then is to connect to that, or to reunify with it. And I don't think you need to die to have an experience that can transform you or your life, or to be born again in the same life. I don't think it's necessary that you have to come to a near-death experience. But I will say that a part of us must die in order to have that experience. My process of discovery in witnessing what happens in terms of human potential, in terms of how people could heal, has changed me. And I consider myself a pretty open-minded person. But between the scientific discoveries that we are uncovering about this innate intelligence of the human body to regenerate itself at any age if it's given the right information, and how our data shows that when you change, every single aspect of you changes. Your face changes, your voice changes, the harmonicity of your voice, the words you use change, your microbiome changes, your brain changes in dramatic ways, your heart changes, thousands of metabolites upregulated in your body, your immune system changes, your gene expression changes, your breast milk changes, your breath changes, everything changes when we change, right? So seeing that kind of evidence, I say to the scientists all the time, I can't believe this is the truth. Like, I can't believe it. Like, I can't believe that we're seeing these kind of changes that say that the human nervous system can manufacture a pharmacy of chemicals that works better than drugs, a lot better than drugs. That's what our data shows. That stretched my understanding because what we're doing is we're studying people that have had dramatic healings from all kinds of health conditions that I never thought was even possible in terms of healing, and when you see people growing back glands and growing back tissues and growing back organs that were surgically removed, you got to really question the nature of reality a little bit more. So science is the contemporary language of mysticism. I think science demystifies the mystical. There's so many reasons for division in the world right now. I've never lived in a time where you can talk to 10 different people and everybody has their own information and their own belief about reality, right? The future is community. When organisms behave in similar ways, there's an emergent consciousness that takes place that's reflected in their biology. If they feel the same emotions, it's the same energy. We can take people with healthy hearts, and we can measure 700 people and 265 of them are healthy. We can take 50 people that are depressed and their heart rhythms are very erratic when it comes to HRV. Every single time the group gets together and meditates, the strong somehow influence the weak. Every meditation, the depressed person during the meditation looks exactly like the healthy. To the point, at the end of 7 days, with their eyes open in the resting state, the depressed person looks exactly like the healthy person. So I'm hopeful that we reach a point where there's enough people that come together in a community that want something better for the world. And that, if that's the case, then there's an organism that is a species. Like I say to the scientists, we're an organism. There's a connection that's taking place where there's a synchronization of human beings. I say that is the force that really changes humanity.